Welcome to Inside Sport. The ancient Greeks knew it. It was captured in the saying, mens sana in corpore sano, or a sound mind in a sound body. The great American writer Henry David Thoreau knew it. Thoreau once wrote, "It seems when my legs begin walking, my mind begins working." In a similar vein, the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "I've walked myself into my best thoughts." Kierkegaard knew it. The American poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, he knew it too. He once said, "By too much sitting still, the body becomes unhealthy and soon the mind." And Albert Einstein, Mr. E equals MC squared himself, the legendary physicist and father of the theory of relativity, he knew it. Einstein once said, "My primary process of perceiving is muscular and visual." The ancient Greeks, Thoreau, Kierkegaard, Longfellow, and Einstein, they were all so insightful into how the body and the mind work together, and so is Pete Saccone. Who is Pete Saccone? Now retired from teaching for 23 years, Saccone taught fifth graders at Meridian Elementary School in El Cajon, California, just east of San Diego, and he's here now to tell us what he and his students did, what he learned through his own life experience as their teacher, that the ancient Greeks, Thoreau, Kierkegaard, Longfellow, and Einstein, all learned through theirs. Pete Saccone, welcome.
Well, certainly glad to be here, Joel.
All right. Pete, to begin, did you teach somewhere before Meridian, or was Meridian your one true school?
No, I taught a year in Connecticut, and then I taught 3 years at the middle school level in El Cajon. And then when I got to the elementary level, that's when I started the It's Funner to Be a Runner program.
All right. And so would you describe for us what it was that your fifth graders did very first thing every morning to start the school day with the Funner to Be a Runner program?
Sure. First of all, it was part of the school day. It wasn't a before-school program. I always had a self-contained fifth grade class, and as soon as the school bell rang at 8 o'clock, we never even entered our classroom. We literally put the backpacks and everything else that the kids take to school, and we went on our running field. I was fortunate to have a field that was about a third of a mile around, completely visible for me. And we, in the beginning, obviously we didn't do what I'm going to tell you from the first couple days of school, but it turned into, after a few weeks of school, we ran, and I mean ran, not racing or anything like that, just ran for approximately anywhere from 40 to 50 minutes, Monday through Friday. And again, of course, we didn't start off that way the first few days of school.
Uh-huh. And how did Funner to Be a Runner come about, and why did you create it?
Well, that's really a simple answer, because I have always known how good I felt as a runner. I always knew that it just did some special things for me, the actual running itself. And other fitness activities, too, would work. But I just decided when I got to fifth grade, and I knew I was going to be teaching these kids all day, the same kids, and I was told, although nobody made us follow the rules, so to speak, but I was told we had to do some physical education. Well, typically physical education meant just a bunch of kids running around and not with any direction, and a lot of kids chose not to participate. Some kids did. There were fights, arguments, and no way was I going to allow that. And I knew for sure that if I got these kids excited about doing something special for themselves, it would make all the wonderful differences in the world, not only physically, but mentally, socially, emotionally. And that's what we did. We started off easy and eventually got to run anywhere from 40 to 50 minutes day after day after day. And then we would go into the classroom. We would write down exactly what they accomplished out there. That would take seconds to do, because we would write down how many laps each kid would do. We convert them. We immediately used it as a math tool. We converted the laps into miles. And we just quickly, I would run down each row. How many did you do? How many did you do? How many did you do? And they felt so proud of what they accomplished. And then we just got into their so-called regular school day. And again, the running was part of that day.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to integrate the physical activity, the running, literally in every area where I possibly could. Certainly in much of the writing, almost all the writing they did, they could always use running as some examples or talk about their running. And by the way, after we ran each day, the kids did pull-ups because we had pull-up bars, and the kids did push-ups. And that was the physical part of it. And then, as I said, I tried to integrate it wherever I possibly could into the classroom, including nutrition. We always had healthy snacks. We had a refrigerator in the classroom. It was just an absolutely wonderful experience for me and for the kids.
So it sounds like you had a whole integrated, holistic environment that you created physically, mentally, emotionally for the kids.
And socially.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. The kids absolutely liked each other. The girls were no different than the boys. The respect was there. The kids never came to school, and they were welcome to come to school dressed in anything they wanted to that was appropriate, but typically they chose to come in their running shorts and nice clean T-shirts, and they didn't wear makeup, the girls. These were fifth graders, and at that age they started thinking about makeup and stuff. Not in my class because it just didn't fit in, so to speak. These kids were really kids, and it was fun to see them excel. And Joel, let me tell you, they excelled. And by the way, on weekends, we would participate in fun runs all over San Diego area. We would participate in 5-kilometer runs, 10-kilometer runs, and occasionally some of the kids even did half marathons. Obviously, it was totally up to them whether they wanted to participate. They had to get there on their own. It wasn't something that the school had anything to do with whatsoever, except, of course, I was there at all of them. And I was able to get the kids in either for free or for a very, very minimal cost. And when the fun run was over, when the races were over, our way to pay back the race director for allowing the kids to run either free or, again, for a buck or two, they would get trash bags from the race director and go pick up all the trash, not on the course, but in the ceremony area where the people would get their awards. So they felt proud. They paid a little dues, so to speak, and of course they were truly admired by all the adults that were there. And we entered races where there were 5,000-6,000 people.
So it wasn't just a classroom you had. It's as if you were creating community with these kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They became really well known in the community. There was a lot written about them because it just showed what kids can do, and they were extremely polite. I didn't have to brief them on anything. It was so natural. And you know why, Joel? Because they became very confident in themselves and very proud of their accomplishments. Some of these kids weren't really good at math. Some of them weren't good at reading. Some of them weren't good in social studies. You know, like all of us, we have our strong points. But what the running did was it made the kids feel special, if in anything, one way alone. Just one special way made a difference, and it's amazing how their academics improved as they became more confident in themselves. Because I would always tell them, hey, if you can do something like running, which is really not an easy thing to do first thing in the morning, you know, it'd be so easy just to sit around and eat junk. These kids did something special, and I always told them, you are special, and because of that, you're going to accomplish a heck of a lot in life, and they got better and better at anything they attempted.
So, you know, it sounds like this was wonderful, but what was the kids' reaction at the beginning of each school year when you told them, okay, we're going out and we're running 40 to 50 minutes each day?
Well, Joel, it happened way before they got into my classroom. Some of these kids begged their parents, literally begged, because they found out early in the spring, or when school got out, rather, you know, just before, after school got out. So in June, they would find out where they were going next year. Many parents would come in requesting the principal not to ever allow their kid in my classroom because the kids who were in fourth grade, third grade would go home and say, oh, this guy, he makes the kids run, you know. And, of course, the weak, and I hate to say it, but that's what they were, the weak parents would allow their kids to dictate to them what should be done. And a lot of those kids, the principal would have to talk to the parents to say, look, this will be a good thing for your kids. But anyway, initially, it was a very negative reaction for some of the kids. On the other side of that, many of the parents came to school in June and said, I want to be sure my kid gets into Pete Saccone's class. And then when they actually got into the classroom that first day of school, and I went over our whole program, a lot of the kids were a little skeptical. And I told them how they had to have shorts or sweatpants to run with. I would give them a chance to change their clothes so they can wear anything they want when we're done running and get nice and clean, and I taught them how to do all that. And Joel, all I can say, for the kids who were skeptical in the beginning, typically those kids became the most enthusiastic of all the kids as the year went on. It was a wonderful thing to see, and I really felt badly for the kids who had parents who allowed the kids to dictate to the parent where they should be placed. Those kids missed out big time.
Yeah.
And I say big time.
And then for the kids who did end up in your class, once they were in the program, how did the parents react to it?
Oh, very, very positively. So many of them came to me and said, thank God I didn't listen to Johnny, or I'm just so happy that he stuck with it and didn't fight me all the time. Because in the beginning, he would come home and he'd say, oh, Mom, please get me out of there. It's too hard, blah, blah, blah. But the parents were very, very, very rarely did I have a parent, and once the year got going and they saw exactly what these kids were accomplishing and how well they were doing in school, academically, socially, so it was way more than physical. I told the parents the running is just a tool I use so that they can be successful in all areas. And most of the parents saw that happen. And, Joel, we ended up getting many parents come to school at 8 o'clock or before. They sometimes would even start jogging out in the field before 8 o'clock, and they ran with us and never interfered. They knew I would not allow any interference, and it was wonderful to see the parents realize just what a good program their kids were in.
So not only were you facilitating community with the kids running on those weekends, you were facilitating family with the parents being involved.
Absolutely. I had kids in my classroom. I had their brothers enter the short fun runs because they weren't prepared as my class of kids would be, because we did it every day. But I had the parents I couldn't control. They'd show up and they thought they were so cool that they could, hey, if my kid can run 6 miles, I can do it, even though I haven't done it. And it was comical, actually. You see the parents at the end of the race or the next day in terrible pain, and the kids were, just a normal thing. Yeah. We were out there the next day after a Sunday run, running like we always did. But yes, the kids, parents got involved, some of the neighbors, and certainly brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm. And as I understand it, according to your principal back then, your students always had the highest test scores in the school. Yeah,
and when you say principal, over those years, I had many, is that, you said principal, didn't you?
Right.
Yeah, we had several principals, and I want to add something to your question in a bit, but in answer to your question directly, yes, in all the years, without any exceptions, at the time they were called CTBS scores, California, whatever, I can't even remember what it stands for now, CBEST and whatever, but the kids always performed unbelievably successfully. Again, it was all based on confidence and hopefully some good teaching in there and the kids supporting each other. And they always did far better. We had like 4 fifth-grade classrooms, so mine was the one, the kids were the active kids, and so it was very easy to compare the test scores with the other 3 fifth-grade classes. And I had to be careful with that because my goal wasn't to, make people feel uncomfortable, but I did have to show that, look what this can do. And it was really, really wonderful. And every time we'd get a new principal, there was some real skepticism with the new principal, even though they'd heard so much about the program over the years. But they knew they were going to have their hands full because they're going to have these parents who, as I said in June, would come in, oh, I don't want my kid in that classroom. The guy's too strict. He's too hard. They shouldn't be running at this age, that type thing. So some of the principals, they were a little more difficult to deal with. But those who really knew and understood why we were there, boy, they were proud to be part of my program.
And the program, even though there were changeovers with principals, you never had to discontinue the program.
Oh, never. No, we had so much community support, and so much was written, not only in the local papers, but the kids were featured in Runner's World, they were featured in Runner, they were featured in California Educator. Oh, I can go on and on. There's so many things they were featured in. It made Cajon Valley Union School District look really good. And I had several, superintendents of school during those years too, maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5 even. So they really, even though they might have not liked the little extra work that they had to do because of it, they knew there was no way they could ever shut me down. They just knew. I mean, they actually would come and visit. A couple of the superintendents would run with us. So we had a lot of really good support, and then we had some support that was kind of fake. But so what? As long as they never shut me down, and they didn't even try. Oh, they'd question me a few times here and there, but never. They knew I was too strong. I wouldn't allow it, and I don't mean that in a boastful way. I just knew what I had, and I couldn't ever have anybody take that away from the kids. But in all fairness, Cajon Valley School District treated me quite well with it. But they had a lot to be proud of, too.
Uh-huh. And what about at Meridian in particular? Did other teachers, given the successes of the program, did other teachers implement the program?
Absolutely. I had a couple of core teachers, maybe 3 over the years, maybe 4 even, who every morning, I remember vividly, I had a 4th grade teacher participate with me, a 3rd grade teacher participate with me, a couple of kindergarten teachers. Obviously, it was modified for that level. And these teachers were good, solid teachers. And boy, I hate to say that because I'm not saying the other teachers who didn't do our program weren't good teachers. They just didn't participate and, in my opinion, missed out on a lot. But in answer to your question, yes, I had several teachers at Meridian over the years participate. And to some degree, the 4th, 3rd grade teachers would pretty much do it just like me, almost to the letter. We ran races together. They participated with us. Even the kindergartners. Kindergartners obviously were out there a much, much shorter amount of time. They were meandering more, but in a good way. In other words, you get the idea.
Yeah.
Yes, we did. We had a lot of additional participation.
Okay, and then with the success of the program there at Meridian and the other teachers participating, was the program expanded to other schools in the district or area?
No, not really. Let me answer it this way, because that's a really good question and a simple one to answer, because I was so much a part of that community. Because it was so popular and so much written about, and by the way, the kids were on TV a bunch of times, PM Magazine, if you remember that program. A lot of the local news stations came out every year, because there was no phoniness about the program. So in answer to your question, I got a lot of people calling me, a lot of schools asking me if I could visit their school and give an assembly, and I would actually handpick, and I tried to rotate all the kids in my classroom. We would go maybe 6, 7 kids, parents. The parents would take the kids and meet me at the school site where we were going to tell them all about the program, and I showed them video and different things. So, in direct answer to your question, we had a lot of interest. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because that's what it was, they got enthusiastic. They said they would give it a shot, but most of them just, after a while, they gave up. They gave in to the complaints of the kids and the complaints of the parents, where I didn't. I just never allowed them to, get me out of it. I just wouldn't. I never gave in. I was too strong for that. So, yeah, there was interest, but unfortunately it never really... Never, ever really was there a whole lot of follow-through. San Diego State University asked me if I would do a continuing ed class on It's Funner to Be a Runner. And teachers who participated actually earned credit. And that was the closest I came to getting people who, I had an audience who I really thought I could affect. It was a 2-day class, weekend classes. But even there, they would leave extremely excited about it, and not a lot of follow-through. Because,
right.
Joel, to be honest with you, I took it for granted because it was easy for me, because I was a runner. And by the way, the walking would work equally as well. So I didn't need to be a runner. I just was one. And I didn't blow a whistle and say, okay, kids, start running. They knew I was out there with them. I did everything they did, the push-ups, the pull-ups, and we laughed together. I ran with all the kids. They knew exactly what I expected. Some teachers just, I guess, we're all different. I'm not really good at teaching the academics. I was good because it was 5th grade. But some teachers are brilliant when it comes to the teaching aspect, but it's difficult for them on other aspects of it, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And now, what about when you retired after those 23 years? Did they continue the program at Meridian?
Unfortunately, not one day. The day, and again, this could sound like I'm saying, I left so everything fell apart, but I can't answer it any other way. When I left, that ended the program.
Why do you think that's so, given all that you brought to the school with the program?
Well, it's hard to answer that. I really don't know. It'd be easy for me to say because they knew that I'd be out there. They knew nothing was ever going to change with me, and I had a lot of effect on those other classrooms. And some of the teachers, the few that I told you who worked with me, they were wonderful. Why they didn't continue it, I don't know. I think they knew that when I left, there was a strong link that was missing, because I would support them when even their, like the 3rd grade teacher would get parents saying, I don't want my kid doing that. He's always too tired. And by the way, there wasn't a whole lot of that, but there was enough of it to wear a teacher out. But I didn't let them wear me out. So I think when I left, I guess the link was gone, and it was easy just to throw in the towel. And I know for a fact it never once continued.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because a news release that was issued by the California Department of Education in December of 2002, it was entitled, "The State Study Proves Physically Fit Kids Perform Better Academically." And it basically showed that students who are physically fit and engage in regular physical activity perform better academically than unfit students. And the state superintendent of instruction at that time, Delane Easton, in that news release, she had this quote, and it was, "This statewide study provides compelling evidence that the physical well-being of students has a direct impact on their ability to achieve academically. We now have the proof we've been looking for. Students achieve best when they're physically fit. Thousands of years ago, the Greeks understood the importance of improving spirit, mind, and body. The research presented here validates their philosophical approach with scientific validation." And yet, despite these statewide results, the successes of your program, we also have research that shows that the schools are actually cutting back on physical education rather than increasing it. And there's a study that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention put out every 6 years called the School Health Policies and Programs Study. And what's interesting about this, Pete, is that while the study shows that while 69% of elementary schools require physical education, only 4% provide it every day, 5 days a week for all their kids. At the middle school level, 84 require it. Only 8% provide it every day for the kids. At the high school level, 95% require it. Only 2% provide it every day for all the kids. And this is sort of like what happened to your program at Meridian once you left. If you weren't there to push it, then it wasn't going to happen. And yet the results show that the more physically active the kids are, not only are they healthier, but they perform better academically. And it's as if these supposedly educated people running the show are shooting themselves in the foot, and it's the kids who are losing out academically as well as physically. What do you think is going on here?
Well, Joel, that was everything you said there, and I listened to every word of it. I'm telling you, that was my biggest frustration. I was amazed at how they saw, and I won't speak just about my program, but that's what I'm focusing on here. They saw what we did. There was so much written about it, and they would always say, "Oh, good job, Pete, but that's where it ended. Nobody, I don't know why the State Department of Ed didn't say, "We want you, we are requiring you to." I think the unions have something to do with it. Too many of the teachers would balk at it, and there was never any follow-through. So at one time, it would frustrate me so much. One day I finally said, you know what? I'm just going to keep doing it. If it's just my own classroom, I'm not going to let any of that bother me. And I didn't. And yet I was so amazed that people wouldn't pick up. And again, it wouldn't have to be running. It wouldn't have to be running. I don't care what it would be, as long as the kids were moving. And you kept saying physically and academically. You'd be amazed at socially how much better these kids are. And emotionally, they're just proud. And so, yes, academically, there's no question they improve. But in so many other areas, you'd be amazed at what the parents would tell me at how their eating habits change. Mom, I don't want that white bread. Well, I'd rather have whole wheat bread. That's one example that I would hear all the time, and the parents would smile and say, "See what you're doing to my family?" So no, it was the most. Everything you said was the most frustrating part of what I did all those years, but never enough to say, "Well, if no one's going to do it, I'm not either." I stopped caring. I just kept doing what I did, and I know I touched at least 30 kids, plus a whole lot more in my school for those other teachers who worked with us. And there were others outside the school. I got all kinds of letters and stuff saying, but it should have been widespread. It should have been nationwide. And, some of my friends would always say to me, just pretty much what you asked, what is it with these people? Don't they see what this can do? And we would just shake our heads.
And so did you have a sense of not feeling appreciated for what you were delivering with these kids in the community?
No, not really. No, I always in the back of my mind knew that most people really didn't have a clue as to just how much these kids were benefiting. But, I knew the kids got what they needed from me, and that's all that really mattered. No, I didn't go home with my head down. There was some frustration, sure, but never enough, as I said a couple of times, to give in. And no, because I knew. I just knew. Really, I had a self-contained classroom. I showed up every day. The first thing we did was go out there and run and do those other little activities that we did. Go to the restrooms. The kids knew how to clean up. I was so proud of them. They came to school bright and shiny, and they were just friendly with each other. But I was very strong with them. They knew what I expected, and they liked that. That's the other thing, their behavior. The behavior problems become minimal with kids. Joel, I had a lot of parents who looked at me as though maybe I could save their child, which, by the way, made it hard for me at times because I ended up getting a lot of difficult kids. But it was so wonderful to see these kids who had never had success at school, and all of a sudden they could put one foot in front of the other and become pretty darn good at it, and they become changed people. They didn't have their temper tantrums anymore. And by the way, that just also makes me think of kids who would come to school with their asthma medicine day after day, and the parents would say, "Oh, I don't think my kid," and I would say to the parents, "If you trust me, put it in my hands. I guarantee you your kids won't be using their inhalers after a few weeks in my classroom." And Joel, almost without exception, the kids didn't need their inhalers. They were always told, "Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that." And we went out there, and they did what I would think would be one of the more difficult things to do with kids who have trouble breathing. And all it did was expanded their lungs and their breathing potential.
Yeah, it's as if you're saying it's more the sedentary lifestyle that's creating the necessity for these kinds of medication, whereas if the kids became more physically active, it's the same thing. With the more physically active you are, the less health care you need.
Absolutely. And remember, I didn't handpick these kids. I got like any other teacher. First day of school, I had a classroom of kids, with the exceptions of kids whose parents, as I said earlier, fought to not have them in, and then on the other end, kids who fought to get in, and then I had the kids who just showed up, so to speak. And you know what? I had kids who were heavy on their way to obesity. I really focused on those kids. I told them how proud I was because I knew it would be a little more difficult for them. And I had the other kids. That was, probably the best thing that I enjoyed it all those years at Meridian was seeing kids who were trim and they could run and they would go out of their way to help the kids who struggled. They would encourage them, and we all encouraged that, of course. That's good teaching, to encourage kids to be nice to each other. So yeah, I can't begin to tell you, and my point about the obesity thing was, I guarantee you at the end of the year, we did not have overweight kids. They just didn't happen. You'd be shocked at some of the at that age. The potential of getting away from that obesity possibility is good because they're still young enough. But they wait till they're in 9th grade, 10th grade, out of high school. Then that's their lifestyle forever. But I saw some wonderful changes in kids who would come in overweight and become very good at what we did, lose weight, become way healthier, both academically, physically, socially, emotionally, all aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. That's just like the ancient Greeks.
Yeah.
When we started. Final question. You were at Meridian for 23 years. You really made it happen for your kids. What do you think has to happen to turn this around for kids across the country and in our nation's public schools?
Boy, Joel, I've thought about that without knowing that question, what's coming from you. I've thought about that from day one. And I have often wondered, and we kind of touched on this a little earlier, why the states, the state departments of ed, why they just don't follow through and say, this is a part of teaching. This is what we're going to do. It doesn't have to be running. I keep saying that because really, running is difficult for some people. Some teachers, I can't imagine some teachers all of a sudden, after they've been around forever and they're overweight themselves, becoming runners. But I've always maintained, and I'll try to answer your question this way, if every single day, not before school program, not an after school program, not a lunch program. I'm not saying any of those aren't better than nothing, but for it really to work, it has to be treated as importantly as math, reading, social studies, science, all the academics. It has to be required each day, and if the state departments mandate it that every single day, and by the way, it wouldn't have to be 40, 50 minutes like I did it, and I could talk about that, that's another issue, but if every day these kids were required with the teacher in an orderly fashion to walk for 30 minutes, whether it be just before, not before school, but the first period of school, or maybe the mid-morning, anything, any part of the day, I don't care. I always found first thing in the morning, these kids would come back into their classroom and were their minds ready to learn. So in answer to your question, the only way it's going to work is if it's mandated. There's no other way. There's just no other way, and it can't be through a physical education teacher. It's got to be done with kids who are in self-contained classrooms, which is pretty much prevalent, where the teacher just says, every day we're walking, and they all put on their shoes, comfortable shoes. They don't have to dress out like we did and change clothes, but I had that down to a science. But none of that has to be done. Just go out and walk. And you could talk about cold weather. Everybody can come up with all the excuses in the world. And there really aren't any excuses. For the days where somebody really couldn't get out because of total wet rain and, that kind of stuff, which we fortunately didn't have much of in San Diego area, they can do something in the classroom. In other words, it can be done, but it will never be done until it's shown to be as important as anything else that's done in that classroom.
Yeah, so you're saying this really has to be a national agenda.
Yes. In my opinion, for it to work, and if it ever did come to that, you would see an enormous amount of changes in young kids.
Okay. Pete Saccone, a true educator for 23 years at Meridian Elementary School in El Cajon, California. Thanks for being with us on Inside Sport.
It was a pleasure talking with you, Joel.